Hello. Could you all have the conversations outside, please? Thank you. So, Eric, be quiet. Thank you. All right.
Wow, it's a skill in and of itself.
How did that happen?
So, we're going to start off by introducing our new members, and they're going to introduce themselves. So we have, to my right, Lisa Rivedo. Do you want to tell us about yourself?
I work for CareFlight. I'm a flight nurse for...
Use the microphone.
Sorry about that. I work for CareFlight. I'm a flight nurse for over 16 years.
Closer.
16 years.
And then Jeffrey Mincy, that's right.
I'm Jeffrey Mincy. I'm the EMS Director for Coriel Memorial Healthcare Systems in Central Texas.
Awesome. So we'll go around Dr. McCarthy to my left.
Jamie McCarthy, emergency medicine physician at UT Houston.
I'm Richard Smalling. I'm a cardiologist in Houston at UT.
Tim Mixon, I'm an interventional cardiologist at Baylor Scott & White in Temple.
Christine Uhas, I'm a network coordinator, live in Corpus Christi, Texas.
Todd Haugen, I'm a paramedic and I'm from El Paso, also chair of our RAC.
I'm Catherine Bissell, and I'm an emergency room nurse and work at SETRAC.
Thank you very much. We circulated the minutes back in November. We have to approve those. Do we have a motion?
Motion.
Move approval. Second. Anybody opposed? So the minutes pass. The next, what has been percolating for a long time is the idea of trying to pursue a gap analysis of pre-hospital STEMI care with a fairly significant participation in STEMI receiving centers, or PCI centers, if you will, in the action registry and get with the guidelines. We have a pretty good data set showing care levels in those hospitals, and by and large they're meeting at the 95 to 97% level, so they're meeting all the current benchmarks. And despite all this, the mortality from STEMI has not fallen. It's exactly leveled, even though the door-to-balloon times have dropped from 120 minutes to 90 minutes or less in the majority of facilities. So it's become clear that the pre-hospital phase is going to be a key target for improving outcomes in STEMI care, mainly to initiate reperfusion therapies before the patient gets to the hospital. Currently, most of the patients get a PCI 4 hours into their infarct, which is 2 hours too late to do a whole lot of good. So Dr. McCarthy and Dr. David Wampler have been involved with discussions regarding this effort. And so, Jamie, why don't you get us up to speed on that?
Sure. So there's, with the last legislative effort, there was some additional funds available to the RACs to assist in the data collection mandate, both for STEMI and stroke, which I'm sure most of you are aware. As the money's distributed, small amounts for some, larger based on size of RACs. But really, for anyone who's tried to do any database work, it's certainly not enough to go out and buy a large off-the-shelf database or purchase one to be able to collate this data. So, but there have been many of the RACs have been working at this a long time, and I think STRAC is probably the furthest along with the work that they've done to incorporate all of their STEMI data, working on stroke as well. And SETRAC has agreed, I guess, to partner with STRAC to collectively do their data collection and cohort it so that we can start to amass this more as a region and as a state, not as just the individual agencies or individual RACs. There's still a bit of work to do to map some of these fields out to make sure they all collaborate, and some of the folks we collaborate with at UT, at the School of Bioinformatics and Public Health, have offered their assistance to sort of map all these fields out, especially with the multiple different EMS data collection pieces that there are, some still manual on paper, several different systems, none of them really speak well together, but it's all data that could be mapped out so that we have better and more accurate, I guess, data about what's really happening with our patients in the pre-hospital phase before they get to the hospital for ultimate care. You know, the large national push on time intervals has dropped or been removed from the door-to-balloon. That's fallen off national reporting. That's no longer publicly reported, door-to-balloon time is. The large effort is shift from first medical contact to device, whether it's balloon or aspiration. And many facilities have struggled with how to capture that. And the individual hospitals who do reporting and are interested in accreditation are responsible for the pre-hospital component and gathering that. And we're hoping that these efforts will make that simpler for hospitals to be able to report the data required, simpler for the RACs to be able to report the data that's required, and most importantly, have this be actionable data that we can look to move the target and identify areas at risk. So for the areas that are, folks that are here that are not quite sure what to do and how your RAC is going to be involved, I'd encourage you to reach out to SETRAC or to STRAC to perhaps collaborate and participate in this. They've got the skeleton. It'll be fairly simple for other groups to collaborate with them to come on board without having to reinvent the wheel for the extraction pieces out of the EMS databases and EMS software. But more to come there.
So Robert is not here. Anybody hear from Robert, whether he was coming or not? Okay. So Dr. Wozniak is our representative to the Cardiovascular Disease and Stroke Council of DISHES, and he will be interfacing with them in terms of this effort. DISHES also has a pre-hospital effort and has chosen a few data fields to track in the pre-hospital phase, and I think the joint effort between STRAC and SETRAC will expand that substantially, and hopefully we'll have a more robust data set for those populations of STEMI patients. In addition, Dr. McCarthy has a colleague, Dr. Jim Langenbeer, who was the key data analyst in the Caruth project, and as part of that, he had to map the pre-hospital fields with the hospital fields in the Dallas area. So that's some of the benefits of that research hopefully will be disseminated to this effort. Yeah, go ahead.
So 2 questions, Jamie. So are you saying that these 2 RACs are intending to do that, other RACs can jump on right away, or that's down the road?
So, yeah, so I see someone right back who may be able to help us answer. I don't know that they're ready for other folks to jump right in, but the clear intent was to make this a structured platform that other RACs could jump in so that we had a large regional collection of data. And the clear intent is for the larger RACs to be able to help with the smaller, but I will defer the mic.
Thanks, sir. So we're actually way further along in all of that. And after we had the meetings in November and December, Catherine and Preston, my director Preston over clinical informatics, have been working feverishly, and we have created several options for RACs, and we've already had meetings with them and have 11 of the 22 RACs committed. Dallas, Houston, and San Antonio have dedicated $25,000 each to this effort, and then the budget's around $125,000. So the delta, we've essentially divided up and used a formula, the same formula that distributed the money. We actually applied to that delta so that other RACs would be able to get in at a much lower cost, and because their money that they got off the CVD Council was also at a much lower rate. Like, so I got maybe $57,000 per year, but another RAC might have gotten $13,000. So I'm willing to spend half of my money towards the data project, and but their costs may be only $1,800 for their particular. I'm kind of making the numbers up, but you see the point. The value of that is it's less from a percentage perspective from them. So they're paying $1,800, they only had $13,000. Well, I'm paying half. Well, yeah, but I still have 25 grand. So, $1,800 away from $13,000 still leaves them some money, because $10,000 versus $25,000, I still have 2.5 times as much real money. So we really did try to be sensitive to those factors, and so the largest racks who got the most money are paying $75,000 of the $125,000 out of 3 racks alone. So I say that because I think when the formulas came out, there was initial play to just give everybody $25,000 across the board, and that really wasn't effective. But conversely, I guess I'm trying to say that the larger racks are trying to do their part with respect to bearing the burden, the vast majority of the burden, over 65%.
And what is the money for? Just creation of it or ongoing analysis or?
Yes. So we're going to create the Rack Data Collaborative. That's sort of the name we're using now for both stroke and cardiac data. We'll be able to utilize the fields from the state cardiac registry, essentially the same fields that Action is providing. We can take an Action upload. We can take a Get With The Guidelines upload. We have created the ability for them to enter that data directly if needed. And so we've created all opportunities we can. They can, and we call it, I don't know what the real name is. I call it the Happy Meal and the Full Meal deal, but that's, so there's some smaller data points, a subset that really is required. And so if it's a small facility, they can do this on their phone and enter in that patient level data for each patient as it comes in, but only the 6 or 8 or 10 questions that would be necessary to meet the requirement for the CBD Council. But they also have the option to do the full load and put all the data in if they so chose. So it allows small hospitals or maybe not PCI centers to participate at a minimal impact from the data entry, and it allows the bigger facilities, either if they're in Action, upload Action. If they're not in Action, they have an opportunity to be able to participate at that level.
And it's cardiac, stroke, and EMS.
Yes. Oh, yeah, and we've done the NMSIS upload as well. So we can do, NMSIS is the file from EMS, and so the NMSIS 3 or whatever the
We're not
thing
at
is.
NMSIS 3, but NMSIS 2 we can accept. NMSIS 3 is coming.
And we've already done tests both from electronic charts from Zoll, from Intermedics, from other providers, and we're doing a few more tests this week. So our timeline really is to be, the product is live. The product is live, but we want to start on March 1st. All racks have we're going to put it out today on the listserv. They have we met earlier this morning, that's why the timelines are just now out. So 1 March, we want everybody to sign up. So 11 of 22 have already signed up. We have some demonstrations that are going to come online, some webinars that Preston and his gang are going to do in the near future. So, but on March 1st, that's it for 2016. There would be an opportunity for 2017. Each year you could sign up. Again, if you didn't do it, you're not out forever. If you don't sign up this year, they're not out forever. But for this year, we have to pick a day, and here's the day where everybody's going to sign up or not sign up.
Why?
Because we can't incrementally keep rolling it out from the pricing perspective. We have to divide up the funding. Right, so there's the 50,000 that's Delta. We gave them a number that's if all 19 get in. But if 11 only get in, that's a new number for them. It's gonna marginally increase each. So it's actually to everyone's advantage for everybody to get in financially at least. So we're encouraging all of them to get in, but we didn't burn the Constitution, right? If they want to do it another way, we certainly are.
I have 2 questions. So is the data that the racks would put into this accessible back to the racks?
Yes, so that's the best. That's sort of the best part. We're going to be building canned reports. That's also part of what the money is being utilized for. So we're going to build canned reports with the group's participation in developing those reports, and those will be available anytime 24/7 to that RAC committee, that cardiac committee in Midland or wherever. They can be able to run their own reports on their own hospital's data in an aggregate perspective, but just for their rack, yes.
Okay, second question is, would this database be able to submit and satisfy a state-level database that the rack systems could initially put into this, and then this could provide the state
That's the originating goal for the whole project.
for the whole state?
Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
That was our goal.
And I would point out I think the one real differentiator in this data effort is including the NEMSIS data is unlike any other collaborative data collection effort that's been done around cardiac care.
Yeah.
It's always been an extremely limited pre-hospital data set. Even the action is very limited. This gives us far more robust data about what's actually happening with those patients.
There is work still to be done to tie some of those things together on the MS stuff, and we have some efforts underway with some experts that have done that in the past. So, yeah, we have a plan.
I mean, that's the whole kit and caboodle. I mean,
I-
otherwise it's action, which we're all a part of action.
We agree.
So,
We agree.
now, when you say there's still work to be done to make sure that
We have a plan,
pre-hospital.
and we've been given advice from other people that we're trying to meet with, and when we combine what our plan is with other people's plan, if they can find time, then we will move forward.
I think, yeah, I mean, it's an important incremental step. The first compelling piece was to allow a platform that meets the state requirements for all the racks to start building collaboration as you layer in the cooler stuff on top of it.
Yes. We've got to meet the CBD council requirements first for the money. I mean, first and foremost, we got to do that, right? If we can't do that, we can do all the whiz-bang stuff in the world, but if we don't meet the requirements of the money first, we're missing the boat. So we're tackling that first, but this will be an ongoing effort for the next 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, we're going to be building this constantly, and this has real implications for the state of Texas.
So you said that hospitals could send their action data through this platform and it could be extracted. Now,
It's an extract. So you go to your
Yeah.
action registry. We have a brain chart that's teach you how to do it. So you go. There's a way to do it. I've never actually done it.
does
So
that
you
not
log-
require contracting from each hospital with this database manager? I mean, that's...
Sure. So we have BAAs in place that are either being put in place from the rack that they're a part of to the facility. Some racks already have BAAs in place with their facilities. If they don't, then they're needing to do that now. And then we have sub-BAAs between each participating rack and the Rack Data Collaborative.
BAA, explain BAA.
The Business Associate Agreement, I'm sorry, it's the HIPAA, PHI, the Protected Health Information component to all that stuff.
You guys have been busy. That's awesome. That is totally awesome. Catherine, do you have anything to add? I mean,
I want to thank Catherine, by the way, sir. Catherine has done yeoman's work. Preston and Catherine, I bet, she's been over at least twice to San Antonio 3 times and traveling and been on the road back and forth, spent dozens of hours on the phone and days at our shop helping us get this. Without her help, it would have been really difficult to do this. So the Cetrax track relationship has been strengthened with her efforts, and I appreciate that, Catherine.
Thank you.
thank you, Eric.
Yes, sir.
So,
Sorry, I was loud.
note to minutes. First apology by Eric Epling. All right. Well, back in the day when Lonnie came to Houston and organized the cardiac care committee of CETRAC, various committees were formed, and one of them was a committee that Catherine chaired, I believe. I believe you were the chair, to formulate a cookbook, if you will, for administering fibrinolytics pre-transfer from a non-PCI center to a PCI center. Catherine, you want to tell us about that and where people might find that information and so forth?
Sure. the Cardiac Care Committee did get together, and one of the things that we found is that the administration of lytics was not being given a lot in the rural facilities, and mostly it was because they just didn't have kind of something to go by. And so the Cardiac Care Committee did develop what we call a non-PCI toolkit. It was developed about 6 years ago. It's guideline-based, and it takes a rural facility through everything that they would need, including patient information, indications, contraindications for the administration of lytics, gives them some timelines, goals, but it made it kind of quick and easy. We put it into a packet, had it in their ER, they could just pull the packet out, fill out the information, and it would go on to the receiving facility as well. So great information on both sides. One of the things through the data, being part of the Duke STEMI Accelerator project, we were able to look at our metrics and actually wanted to see how many times our patients were meeting the 90-minute goal for transfer of those patients. And what we found is that, by and large, we're not meeting them. And so hospitals weren't giving lytics, but we weren't transferring the patients in a good amount of time either. And so the Cardiac Care Committee has again brought this up, being a part of the Duke STEMI Accelerator 2 project. It's a new effort that we're going to be looking at again, and using the data that's coming out of the project as the reason why we need to start looking at the administration of lytics again. And so we wanted to bring this back up because it is a toolkit that is available on the CETRAC website. It's available for anybody to look at. Some hospitals have put it into their EMR. Some hospitals like it on the paper. However you like it, I know, Tiana, you've used it in your hospital, but it gives you something to go by. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's already there. But the data is very clear. We're not treating these patients in the timelines that we need to be treating them in. We need to probably be looking more at some lytic administration.
So Jamie, can you be a little more granular about that, that comment?
So at least in the CETRAC region, we've looked at this very carefully. And what we know is that of the patients who were transferred to a PCI center from a non-PCI center, that just about 50% were treated within the guidelines. Half of them were not, fell outside of the guidelines in terms of timing. We had a regional meeting to discuss some of the challenges, and the reason patients miss timing is everything from an ambulance with a flat tire to fog on an overpass, to bad traffic on the West Park Tollway, to helicopter diverted because of weather, to every possible issue you could come up with. And then when you looked at the number of patients last quarter in CETRAC who, actually maybe the quarter before, but somewhere between 2 and 5 patients per quarter are receiving pre-hospital fibrinolysis prior to transfer, and less than half of those are done within the guidelines as well. So when you look all in, there's a huge area for opportunity for earlier treatment for patients being transferred. And in the aggressive push for balloon for everybody, we've really left, we look at the medians and mean times and feel pretty good that the numbers look all right, but for half of our patients, they're well outside the guidelines when an appropriate therapy was there and available. So Catherine's kind of helped lead some of this, and we'll have a large initiative rolling out of CETRAC, but it would encourage all of the RACs to look at this data very carefully, because I'm sure, we all thought we were doing pretty well until we looked at it carefully and realized that on 50% of the patients, we've completely swung and missed.
So years ago, there are a number of publications that seem to suggest that administration of fibrinolytics, particularly pre-PCI, was associated with significant adverse events and not in worse outcomes. Subsequently, a host of randomized trials and a meta-analysis have all shown that the bleeding risk associated with fibrinolytic administration pre-PCI, even relatively quick, immediately pre-PCI, was no greater than PCI alone, A. B, that the outcomes at hospital discharge were far superior if the patient got pre-hospital lytic in the transfer situation. So these are transfer data. And so there really wasn't a penalty for giving them, even despite the Cindy Grinds and Bill O'Neills and Greg Stones of the world who still maintain, an issue with that. So we haven't, by reducing our door-to-balloon times, we haven't improved outcomes. I think this is the next frontier. You all know that, or many of you may know that we piloted this 10 years ago and showed a more than 50% reduction in mortality and a 70% reduction in cardiogenic shock by doing this in an urban setting, much less the transfer setting. So I think the time is right to push ahead. We don't have a whole lot on the agenda today, but I wanted Jamie to talk a little bit about, I guess we have to approve the Rider 67 data elements that DISH's and the Cardiovascular Disease and Stroke Committees come up with. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe we have to do it. Do we have a copy that we can pull up or no?
I didn't supply that, unfortunately, but here's this.
Yes, remind myself. The Rider 67 had a recommendation that's been disseminated, but a recommendation for the data points that would be collected, and that's what the groups have been moving towards going on them. They're really fairly straightforward. I'm happy to just kind of quickly go through them. I won't go into the intense detail, just in case there are any questions about them, and I guess our committee is tasked to approve that these are the ones going. They're asking each RAC to first report the total number of STEMI cases that come in. The second item is the method of arrival for the STEMI cases that come in. They're looking for EMS, ambulance, and non-transfers, looking for private transportation, walk-ins. Others, the air transport, mobile ICU, creates sort of a strange bucket, but that's similar to a data field in action, so a national number. And then the number that are transferred in, and then the number that are unknown, and that number, of course, should equal the total number of STEMIs that you had. Also looking for the total number of STEMIs that received a documented door-to-balloon or device time less than equal to 90 minutes from arrival at the STEMI facility. They want the total number of confirmed STEMIs that were treated with PCI, and for transfer patients that were transferred for PCI that had a door-in, door-out of 30 minutes. So they're very interested in looking at hospital number 1. Patient rolls in, did they get out within 30 minutes?
Can I ask a question on
Yes.
that? So I did receive some feedback on that from hospitals, and hospitals were asking, do we want to get that data from the STEMI receiving or the STEMI referral center? We don't want them to both give us that information, right?
So good question. My understanding is that I guess in some ways that comes to the RAC, right? I mean, the RACs are being tasked with reporting this data.
Right, but I wonder if we should make a recommendation so that way everybody reports the data the same. And
Okay.
so if we want that data to come from a STEMI receiving center, because they would know maybe their door in, door out, I just think we need to probably give some guidance on that.
I think we might have missing data elements if we take the information from the referring center.
From the referral center.
Yeah,
I think
no,
it needs to be
I
receiving.
think the receiving
Yeah.
center ought to be
Yeah.
they're the ones who own the patient. Ultimately, they're the ones who did the intervention and task them with partnering. They're going to have more resources to reach out to referral centers and get the information that they
Yeah.
need on that.
So there's several
individual
data points that maybe we can make the recommendation. I don't know if we can make the recommendation to the CBD Council that we make sure that we put that as part of our data dictionary, that we want that information to come from the STEMI receiving center.
patient. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is something we could recommend.
All right,
that-
so can you state that succinctly? So I
So I think I
got to
can.
put it in the
So-
damn
so-
minutes, okay?
So I would say that we'd recommend that the receiving facility of the STEMI patient that performed the definitive care is responsible for collecting and providing all of the data on that patient, on the STEMI patient, whether it's pre-hospital data or hospital from a referring
So those
facility.
CBD data, or those cardiac data
Yeah.
points, we want from receiving centers.
Yes.
STEMI receiving centers.
Send me a text.
I will. I'll send you an
Or
email.
send me an email,
I will.
and I'll give you the account later.
Okay.
email account.
The next item interested in was the total number of patients that received thrombolytic therapy as part of their urgent treatment. This is an interesting item that's not collected in any other data field. They would like to have the health insurance status for all confirmed STEMIs, those with health insurance, those without, and then unknown. The stroke data points I'm going to skip. I'm not going to read those. That's for somebody else, right?
Correct.
We don't need to worry about that.
Yeah.
So that's really it. And I think I'd use this to again mention that those are will give us just a very tiniest understanding of what's happening in our state and in our region, which is, I think, sort of the efforts that Eric Epley just described. With the larger data collection, we'll be able to give us a lot more information that's far more potentially actionable to improve the health care for our STEMI patients than simply a small number count. This is an important first step, and I think this step has allowed a more robust data collection. And I'm certainly not interested in making excessive reporting requirements for anybody, but I think this has allowed us to open a door and really get a much better understanding of what's happening with STEMI patients.
So, do you want to make a motion?
So I would make a motion that this committee, I guess we're approving, we are going to would recommend these to GTAC for inclusion.
Inclusion and as modified by your recommendation. So if you could email that to me, then I'll put it in and submit it.
Thank you.
So any discussion of this?
I think this is a good starting point, and this is a good place for a minimum data set. Hopefully we'll be able to add more data pieces to this as this evolves, but this would be a good minimum starting set.
Perfect. So you make a motion?
I think I did,
Is
yes.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Anybody opposed? Okay, so I have a better way to do it, Catherine. You can just edit it on here in a different color or something.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to take the opportunity as chair to add another discussion item. For 15 years, we've been trying to do pre-hospital fibrinolysis with half-dose lytic, feeling that that was a safe way to get the arteries open with a reduced risk of bleeding. And we've published a number of articles on this, and we submitted 2 grants to NIH. Both were approved but not funded. And then the company making the lytic, we had been using Redivase, basically forgot how to make it. It was horribly managed, and eventually, long story short, is another company bought it, found the molecular biologist in Germany that actually figured it out, brought him to Chicago, put him in a courtyard by Marriott, closed all the doors, and they translated how to make it and figured out how to make it. And now there is an FDA-approved drug that has a faster onset of action, more efficient lysis with lower bleeding risks. We proposed to the company that had done this a multi-center national trial to do a randomized blinded test of pre-hospital half-dose fibrinolysis versus primary PCI, plus PCI versus primary PCI. They did market research and apparently talked to Bill O'Neill and Eric and others who talked them out of it. And they've come back to us to propose we do a pilot in Texas, a blinded, double-blind, randomized trial. The randomization scheme is fairly straightforward, so nothing would be done in the field other than they sign a consent to do this. They provided $1.3 million in-kind support, meaning drug, plus $150,000 of seed money. We've raised from grateful patients another $350,000, so a total of $500,000 to start up the trial. We will have to show something to their board to convince them to go to expand the trial to national multi-center trial. One of the issues that was pushed back on was the ability to, we actually wanted to test several delivery systems. One, an urban delivery system, which we've already done and shown was effective. But the second one would be a hub and spoke delivery system, which you all are familiar with. And then the third, Christine mentioned, was the aeromedical delivery system. So I would like the panel, the committee, to discuss these barriers that were mentioned, and namely, quote unquote, it's impossible to carry lytics in ambulances. So, you know, I think this is an important issue. So, Jamie, you want to tackle it, that piece? Let's just go around the horn and everybody.
So I'll start, and we certainly have other expertise at the table.
Hold on, so you're still talking about agenda item number 4, right?
No, this is.
Because there's nothing on the agenda
Yes,
otherwise.
we're talking exactly about agenda item number 4. Thank you, Bobby.
All right, and when you said you're talking about the money and you used the word "we," who is "we"?
Well, we is the group in Houston, you know, David Person and CETRAC actually, and UT School of Biomedical Informatics. So.
Okay. Just want to make sure clarification, we're still on agenda.
Yes, yes, okay.
So, I guess if you look at the first tier, the hospital transfer is easy. That's all possible and doable, and probably should be done as standard for most of our transfers. The pre-hospital piece is more complicated with sort of 3 barriers. The first is 12-lead ECG capability in the pre-hospital field. Do they simply have the ability to make the diagnosis? EMS education around diagnosis and drug, whether or not transmission of the 12-lead is used or paramedic interpretation. They're both possibilities, but barriers that can be overcome. The third is drug actually carrying, and the 2 largest barriers there is one is simply expiration and resupplying a drug. Well, clearly it's an expensive drug and not one you're going to have a stash of in every ambulance, that need to be figured out for quality control and recycled and making sure drug doesn't expire. And then the other component of can you refrigerate it? These barriers have all been overcome in individual areas. They've, you know, the early mid-TIMI numbers looking at pre-hospital drugs, some of them done in parts of Texas, showed that fibrinolysis can safely and effectively be delivered in the back of an ambulance to reduce the time to treatment. So it can be done, but in certain areas it's going to require capital investment to make it happen, whether it's 12-lead ECG capabilities, whether it's training money, whether it's transmission funds for the defibrillators, or simply refrigeration units and the quality control required for those. But certainly can be done. I mean, if we have West I-10 EMS unit is now carrying liquid plasma in their emergency vehicles, so if we can carry plasma, we can probably figure out a way to carry a vial of drug as well. But I am sympathetic that those are going to be barriers that would need to be tackled and overcome one agency at a time.
So we were able to do it in Houston a long time ago. Bobby, you've done it. You did it up in North Houston, and what about where you are now? Is that possible?
I'm going to defer to the EMS guys, the actual operators.
So is it impossible? No. Is it going to be difficult to convince EMS chiefs with limited purse strings to do it? Yes, it's going to be difficult. You can't go down to Walmart and buy a $50 refrigerator and throw it into an ambulance. It costs about $1,000 per ambulance to upgrade to have a reliable mobile refrigerator, so much so that the vast majority of EMSs, when we looked at therapeutic hypothermia, everybody went to coolers with ice because it was more reliable and it was a whole lot less expensive. So when you start looking at agencies that have 20 to 30 ambulances, you're talking about $20,000 to $30,000 capital investment just to put refrigeration.
Actually, when we did it in Houston, we used an igloo with a bag of saline that had been popped in their freezer, and every shift they just traded out the bag of saline and popped it in.
Right, that's what we do for
That
therapeutic hypothermia.
It works
So you're not
fine.
going to be able to do that for storing a medication.
Sure, we did it. There's no problem.
I would suggest that that does not meet the state's rule for storage of medications and being able to maintain temperatures according to manufacturers' recommendations.
Christine?
There are rules for ambulances with medication stored in a refrigerator, and it falls under the CLIA rules. So you have to be licensed under a lab and follow the very clear lab CLIA guidelines for the storage of those medications in both air and ground ambulances.
Yeah, so there's a distinction between research protocols and other care is probably maybe part of it. But I've not read the rules carefully recently. It's been a long time. My EMS agency has refrigerators in it. We carry other drugs that require refrigeration. So without question, there are some agencies that would have to figure that part of it out. But I don't know what the penetration is for pre-hospital units that have existing refrigeration capability.
If they have existing refrigeration, then there's not really an issue.
Yeah.
It's those that don't, and the vast majority have chosen not to go with refrigeration units because the other drugs that need to be refrigerated have 15 to 30 day out of fridge lives, and they're cheaper to throw away and restock than it is to put a refrigerator in the unit. So it's not impossible. It's just a challenge, and we have to look at how can we entice EMS directors to add this expense for particularly when you look at the patients that are outside the 90-minute window geographically are probably also in a lower volume area. So you've got to tell these guys you need to spend a lot of money on very few patients.
Okay, so I guess we have to go back to the manufacturer and find out what their specifications are on temperature. And it may be simpler than that.
A couple of things, we need to go back and make sure the FDA is going to approve this drug to be carried in an ambulance and in a,
So
because
we
precipitation is an issue.
So we
We
have
several issues.
So we have an IND that's approved by the FDA for this study.
In the pre-hospital
In
setting.
the pre-hospital setting. Okay. So refrigeration is an issue. So let's say the drug doesn't have to be refrigerated. Anybody not comfortable with it?
You're talking about this within the realms of investigation.
If it's an investigational study, yeah.
Yeah, and precipitation.
Well-
In a ground ambulance, it's not that big a deal. In a helicopter, it's a bigger deal.
What-
Drugs will precipitate,
Precipitate.
become crystallized
We-
because of the vibration.
The vibration. Okay.
Okay, another question, Richard. The study that we're imagining here, this is for somebody in Houston that's going to get PCI within 90 minutes, or are we specifically looking at people who are unable to get PCI within 90 or 120 minutes?
All comers. The problem is,
Those are different groups.
no, actually, no, it's not. It's one standard way of treating it. We can't, right now, even in 90 minutes, you don't hit reperfusion in less than 2 hours. So in the pilot trial, the reperfusion time was from symptom onset, the ischemic time from symptom onset to reperfusion was basically under 120 minutes in the majority of patients. So and once we turned off the switch, it dropped to 4 hours. So urban situation, get primary PCI within 42 minutes of pickup, it's 4 hours. So that's sort of where we are, and that's why the door-to-balloon time effort failed. We just can't get it open soon enough. So we have to
But it's
prove
still
it.
two different questions, because the guidelines would currently support if your door-to-balloon time is going to be over 120 minutes, those patients should receive lytics. So that's not really an investigational question. But the guidelines don't support what you just said. I know y'all have excellent, great data, but the randomized trials that have been done to date, for all their faults, haven't supported that, and so the guidelines are not in line with what, you would like to do in Houston.
So you don't do a trial to reinforce the guidelines. You do a trial to see if you can improve care. And we have a substantial amount, 3,000 patients, more than 3,000 patients of data saying this works and you reduce mortality by 50%.
But that's what I'm saying, that's in the under 90-minute.
In all comers, it's all comers, an all comers trial.
In the latest guidelines, it does say it is reasonable because remember in my region, we are giving fibrinolytic prior to direct transfer to PCA because of our distances. And we assume we're not going to make our time, but we do make our time sometimes and we're still giving it. And the guidelines don't say you can't, they say it is reasonable if.
Right. No, and that's your region is doing things the way they ought to be done. And and yes, the guidelines don't support it now, but that's why it would be a randomized trial.
That would be
done
the
with
reason.
consent.
So I think aeromedical, if it doesn't crystallize when the helicopter shakes.
That would be one thing, yeah. There would be no roadblocks for Air Medical. Air Medical would jump on this. They would love to be able to carry fibrinolytics. You just tell us what we need to do, and we will help you make this happen on the Air Medical side.
So it sounds like there's support for transfer, and then the urban issue needs some more work, perhaps, so far. Is that a reasonable interpretation? Okay. All right.
No, I think the urban is a great idea within the realms of an investigation.
Yeah, it's all randomized, so.
I have one question
Yeah.
on the urban. Would we be running this off of medical director protocols, or would we have to contact med control at the time prior to giving?
Well, so that's another issue. In the design of the trial, you'd have to work that out. But basically, the way it worked before is the EMS, all the ECGs were transmitted. The emergency physician in the receiving center that got the transmission got the report from a direct contact with the paramedic. Paramedic had run the checklist on are they fibrinolytic eligible. They're eligible. Transmission clearly shows STEMI. They meet all the inclusion criteria, none of the exclusion criteria. And then the EMS physician in the receiving center fires the
That would work, because our
order.
direct med control then would be, we would be online with direct med control at the receiving center.
Yeah, so, and I think there's opportunity, if you're going to look at this, that to be pragmatic about the way you would interpret. I mean, if you look, I can't remember if it's STEMI 18 or 19, their paramedic-directed pre-hospital fibrinolytic strategy was not done with overread. It was done without transmission. They had highly trained paramedics, read the ECG in the back, went through inclusion, exclusion. They may have radioed in, confirmed inclusion, exclusion with online medical control, but they then delivered it themselves without someone else oversighting. But when you look at larger agencies where education is more difficult, that may not be feasible for them. You look at LA County with a 25% false activation rate to the cath lab, and probably don't want to be giving fibrinolytics to 1 out of 4 incorrectly. So I think, but there's opportunity to explore that, I think, agency by agency. I just think within the Houston market, there are 2 or 3 agencies that would have no trouble doing this by themselves, telling the medical director about it in the morning. But there are several other that would have to be done live with a little bit of on-site or on-eyes medical control.
The protocol's not finalized. We wouldn't initiate it until we had an investigator meeting, everybody vetted their concerns and so forth. All right. So, any comments, Bobby? No? You want to relate the accelerator project and Dr. Purse's, the committee's discussion on accelerator project and Dr. Purse's comments?
Sure. So Some of you have seen, or the Accelerator One project was presented at American Heart not this last fall, the fall before in 14, showing the results of really what happened when you took, Lonnie, you got to correct me, it was 16 or 18 regions, 18? 16? Something like that, 16 or 18 regions around the United States where they gave high-quality data on STEMI patients back to, fed out of the ACTION database, gave it to the regions. CETRAC was one of them, and worked by using the data, were able to move care. And when they looked at what happened in mortality in the accelerator regions compared to the rest of the country, the accelerator regions were able to drop mortality, improve outcomes. One of the really very compelling pieces that came out was, didn't matter if you were transferred or if you were presented to a hospital primarily, the longer you spent in the emergency department, the more likely you were to die. And every 30 minutes, your statistical probability of death went up, I guess, more than doubled, and threefold increase by the time you were done. So the Accelerator 2 project has been rolled out and launched with a number of sites participating, CETRAC being one of them again, but there are a number of places around the country. And the real goal here is to wipe out the ED dwell time, or to basically crush it down to less than 30 minutes, which was the cut point for when mortality started to climb, regardless of what facility you're in, and whether that's treatment in facility A on your way to facility B, or if that's just simply getting them out of the first facility the patient rolls into the lab where they belong quickly, is really the major effort of this. Some of the logistical challenges, and one of the things that Houston's looking at a little bit with Dr. Peirce, is for those of you who've been at a receiving hospital waiting for a acute patient to show up, whether it's a STEMI or a trauma, I know our interventionists have all lost years of their lives waiting for a patient to show up from an outside facility. And for those of you who've been in a non-PCI facility, you have had years of your life yanked away, sweating, watching a patient, waiting for the ambulance to show up and take them. So one of the efforts being looked at locally is the ability to roll in some areas, 911 services as part of the response for transferring. This is being done very successfully in Southern California, where when a ground contracted ambulance is not immediately available, you just call 911, and the local EMS and fire will show up and take that patient to an appropriate facility. That's clearly not feasible in some areas. Some of our more rural areas, to have that happen and leave an area bare is going to be a challenge, but that's one of the things we're looking at locally.
Just to jump on that, two of our services in Central Texas have already done that. Put STEMIs in a non-PCI hospital in the same category as a life-threatening 911 call. And in my agency, even if we have no trucks available, we treat STEMIs level 1 traumas and strokes, no matter where they are, as a 911 call. And so it's done in some areas, and I think there's some evidence to support it. So that's definitely the direction we need to be pushing.
Yeah, so and the Emergency Cardiac Care Committee out of the Mission Lifeline Group, I guess they've been renamed now, but there's a white paper that should be coming out. I think Bill Koenig is leading it, but a white paper coming out basically advocating that use in areas. So you guys are ahead of the curve, but it's something that's going to be coming and driving. I think important part of our regional response.
So, Todd, do you think this effort might work in El Paso?
I think it could. I know El Paso, the city 911 service already has the refrigerators in their trucks. I don't think that would be the issue. I think where we struggle in our region is from the facility receiving side. We still have issues with the emergency room physicians activating the cath lab off of the EMS EKG. They're still waiting to redo those EKGs. When the patients get there, we're wasting a lot of time doing that. I know we just recently had an educational program in Iraq where that was a topic of conversation. And our effort is, how do we get those physicians to trust? I don't think we have a 25% over activation rate like maybe LA does. But we still have that issue where there's, for some reason, this need to redo the EKGs.
What's the driver of that? Is it the interventionalist or is it the ED physician?
But yeah,
It's,
yeah.
It's the what?
It's the interventionalists.
The interventionalist?
Yeah, yelling at the ED physicians. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, it's, the ED physicians have that fear that the interventionalist is going to come down on them, so they're just,
so,
they're
yeah, I
just
mean,
waiting.
part of it, so I came out and presented at the El Paso RAC, kind of walked them through the Mission Lifeline report. I think that was 9 months ago. One of the challenges, and this still exists, is the discomfort of activating on a patient you've never seen. So ringing the bell on a piece of paper without having a good report or knowing really what's going on, and then if it's not quite right, there's this fear of getting their hand slapped. But I think there's this large education component, because I was just surprised. I mean, probably 4 or 5 interventionalists at the meeting I was at, and most of them had no idea that these were transmitted. They had no idea that they were showing up 15 minutes before. They were just kind of high-fiving because most of their door-to-balloon times looked pretty good. But I had no idea that this was a resource that could have been provided to take time off. So I hope but you've got work still to do.
Yeah, there's still
You're
work
not
to
the
do.
only place. You're not.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
this is still a challenge in some areas.
What do you think we could provide to help with that? I mean, there's a lot of intelligence in around the table here, a lot of experience, and I think success stories from Scott and White and from San Antonio, from Houston, might help you.
Oh, no, I mean, I agree. I think if there was maybe even a position paper from the physicians on this committee and your experience, that could be referenced at the RAC level as we strive to educate not only the interventionalists, but the ER physicians and EMS, right? I think that would go a long ways. One of the concerns I still have is, I mean, in the big cities, it's not an issue, but I still think we have I don't know the number, but I think we still have a large area of this state that there's not pre-hospital 12-lead EKGs.
Right.
And I mean, that's a whole nother discussion, but without pre-hospital 12-lead EKGs, then there's no way you're ever going to do pre-hospital fibrinolysis.
No.
So, I mean, in the big cities, I don't think that's the discussion.
Absolutely correct.
That was one of the things the early gap analyses showed.
Yeah.
And so we can't say that. So there needs to be an effort to figure out ways of funding 12-lead ECG machines in underserved areas, I would say. How about that?
For paramedic level ambulances starting 2018, Dr. Greenberg, is that right? Beginning 2018, 12 leads become mandatory under state rule, under EMS rule?
We went back and forth on that a little bit. I think we settled on 2017.
Okay. Yeah, so
Because
within...
we felt 2018, quite frankly, was too long. And
Yeah, so
I
beginning
think we
next
settled on
year,
2017.
all MICU, which is a paramedic level ambulance, will, by state rule, be required to have 12-lead capable EKGs. That doesn't help in your ALS and BLS areas, but at least in the MICU areas, it becomes mandated.
So could you email me that decree or that
So,
rule or whatever it is?
That's part of the rule revision.
Yeah.
So it's not effective yet.
Yeah.
So
but-
we will vote on that tomorrow. We'll push it forward. It has
Okay.
to go through the entire rule process.
Okay.
And I think we picked 2017. We wanted to give everybody a year, and I don't,
So what was the funding mechanism for that?
there's not one.
Unfunded mandate.
It's an unfunded mandate. We felt like that if it was pretty much unanimous, we felt like if you were going to be an MICU unit, you should have 12-lead EKG.
Okay. Todd?
Yeah, so my guess is then there'll be many services that just license at the ALS level. As long as they're not an MICU unit, they're not going to have the 12-lead. So, I mean, I applaud it. I'm glad. I still think we're going to run into the same issues.
And that's, I mean, yeah, there's certainly, and then you've got all the basic units, depending where you've got volunteer response units, and they're certainly not going to have this. But some of this is it's also just penetration, and I think, I think these efforts help. If you wait till we have a switch that covers everybody, we'll end up waiting forever. So I think it's incremental. You get the MIC units first, and, as the price point on these things will start to drift as technology gets better and better, and pretty soon you'll be able to do one on your iPhone, and we'll all have them.
Yeah, no, and I agree, and I wish there was some way we could
Yeah.
have 12 leads on every truck. I don't care what level they're.
Yeah.
In some of the places that we've encountered this across the United States, where we have mostly BLS services or we don't have 12 leads on all the ambulances or availability, we create intercepts with their medicals. So as soon as the BLS identifies chest pain and diaphoresis, if you get those two indicators, they'll provide an intercept. And if the ambulances are carrying the 12 lead and the drug, then it can be accomplished in a lot faster manner.
So by intercept, in our area, the helicopter responds in rural locations directly to the ambulance that's on site at the farm or wherever they are.
Right, so we tell them, don't sit at the farm, load, head the right direction. We create a spot somewhere in between.
Right.
That way, the wheels are turning on the ground truck, the aircraft is launched, they get there, they go ahead and get the 12 lead, and then
we
make a decision.
need a description of that so that we can put it on our website. Can you provide a description of that strategy? Sounds great.
Yeah. I bet Lisa could help me with that, too.
Okay. So we just
You
formed
haven't given her anything yet.
She's been so busy writing. She was next on the list of, you've been so quiet, welcome, but you have to talk. So Lisa and Christine will provide that by the next meeting to discuss,
Yeah, that's doable.
All right. That's great. So, Lisa, so far you've been very quiet, and I think we have a new person to write the minutes for us. So far, what are your thoughts about possibilities of improving STEMI care in the Dallas area, the Metroplex, right?
I really think like the fibrillinic started in the smaller facilities. Outlying DFW we've done it with a few facilities, and it really has helped, but there's a lot more facilities we can outreach to, and getting those EMS involved as well. The big thing, I know he was saying that there's a bad relationship or maybe some lack of communication between the ER physicians and those performing the cath. We have monthly meetings with different hospitals where your EMS providers, your ER physicians, the interventionalists, the nursing staff are all together, and they build such a good rapport that they start to learn to trust each other. They know how you've educated your paramedics. You can also look at response times together, and it builds a good relationship for them to now trust your paramedics when they say, we're activating the STEMI from the field, and not having to do that second 12 lead.
So, and the other thing I heard was Catherine and Todd collaborating on activation strategies and providing a white paper. So Todd, do you want to engage in helping write an outline for a white paper that the members of the committee could help you fill in?
Sure.
Overcoming barriers to pre-hospital activation, something like that. Okay. So we still have 22 minutes. Tim, you've been uncharacteristically quiet. There you go. What do you want to say?
I've got nothing.
You got nothing? Come on. So would you be willing to participate if a double-blind randomized trial?
Absolutely.
Free drug?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
That's right. We work
Well,
together all the time.
That's, I think, a good synergy we have here. So one of the tasks we're supposed to do is come up with goals for the coming year/quarter. And so I put the things that I thought were things that we're actually pursuing, or we need to continue the pre-hospital data collection organization effort. So everybody agree with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then number two is, as we started today, which I thought was a great conversation, is explore mechanisms for administering lytics to STEMI patients identified by the pre-hospital ECG and fibrinolytic eligible patients in an urban care system, a hub and spoke care system, and aeromedical system. So I think we all agree on that. So we sort of started working on that today. And then the last thing that I came up with was we continue to identify gaps in STEMI care in Texas in collaboration with the CV Disease and Stroke Council of DISHES. So everybody agree with that? So we had a very good dialogue with the CVD and Stroke Council in the past 2 years, largely due to Dr. Rutledge's openness in discussing things and interacting with us. And I haven't heard from Robert why he's not here, but I'll call him when we get. Did you take it? Never text you back. So he's supposed to go to the CVD's Disease and Stroke Council meeting tomorrow. Anybody on the committee going to be here tomorrow that might be able to attend that? Because I've got to go back
The
to
CVD council?
Yeah.
I'll be there.
So can you represent us there?
Okay.
You can be Dr. Wozniak if he doesn't show up. But we've got 2 spots. One is for me and one for Wozniak, so you can take either one of them. Okay. So, so I think those are all things. Anybody have anything else we need to put on our to-do list?
I lied to you. 12-lead EKG defibrillator is by 2020.
2020.
January 1st, 2020. We also talked about the January 1st, 2018, or by the end of 2017 is for waveform capnography. Sorry, we had those 2 discussions right together and I got confused. So 12-lead EKG is by 2020, or end of 2019.
Well, maybe we can do better than that. All right. So, anybody else? Yeah.
Just wanted to know if there was any consideration for the drawing of labs prior to administration of fibrolytics pre-hospital or point-of-care lab
Could you
testing.
let us know who you are?
I'm sorry, I'm Curtis McDonald, I'm the Executive Director of the Heart of Texas RAC.
The Heart of Texas track?
RAC.
RAC,
Yes, sir.
Heart of Texas RAC, okay. And your concerns are?
It's not really a concern, I was part of the trial in Montgomery County when we were doing fibrolytics pre-hospital, and we would draw labs prior to administration and inoculate the point of care, the troponin card or something, so it could be run as immediately upon arrival at the facility.
I think that's very doable.
That's doable?
There's places that are currently doing that, and that's part of that CLIA thing. It's about the labeling of the containers and the licensing and keeping track of the temps and all that. But it's doable, it's happening already, so I think we can do that.
Let me ask you a question. Now, why is that necessary? Is it, do the lytics alter the later assays?
No.
No idea.
No,
It was
there's-
just something we did as part of the protocol.
Yeah, they did as part of the protocol to just data collection, looking at where patients, do they have elevated troponins prior to administration to get it.
Right,
It's part of
it's
their.
a troponin
Yeah.
piece that it takes you so long to get, and you get that a little bit faster.
I personally, we didn't do that. It would add another step, you know, another potential delay, I don't know, but
It's done with when you start the line in the back of a truck,
Yeah, yep.
you pop in 2-3 vials of blood, it's right there beside, it doesn't take 2 seconds. I'll let
Everybody-
someone else
everybody agree with
comment on
that?
that.
Yeah, for the most part, EMSs across the state are routinely collecting blood specimens
Okay.
every time they start an IV.
Well, that sounds like a good idea then. Thank you for bringing that up.
Well, I'll throw a wrench in there for just a minute, because we looked at this at the two facilities that I work for, and because of the CLIA designation of the labs, they cannot use pre-hospital blood unless the paramedics were to go and have their competencies checked off annually by that facility. And with so many different facilities, just in El Paso, and obviously Houston's much bigger, Dallas is much bigger, that would be impossible for every paramedic to go to every facility and have their competencies signed off. So our labs will not take pre-hospital blood.
Yeah, I mean, this is a regional, it varies by facility to facility and how close to 200% compliance your compliance people are looking for in the lab. There are some folks that just don't ask the question. There's, you know, so so there's tremendous variation, especially in shops that are doing point-of-care stuff in the ED. For their testing, they're just testing it right there. It's not going off to a lab, and everybody just doesn't worry about it.
Yeah, so point of care, even, I mean, I think there's some EMS services that are doing point of care testing. Again, those cartridges, the cost, all of that, that's a whole nother discussion. But I think point of care testing would be easier to accomplish in the pre-hospital setting.
So is this
statewide.
something that's worth looking at, you know, across, I mean, as part of your gap analysis, can you draw blood and have it run to the hospital, or? not?
It's a,
How big a deal is this?
that's a big lift.
It's a big lift.
Yeah.
I think we need to get through 12 lead and.
Let's
Okay.
get 12 leads on
Yeah,
the truck.
12
So
leads.
you routinely draw them, in El Paso, they said, no, we can't do it.
We're also a hospital-based EMS, and we're not CLIA waived. We fall under our laboratory's CLIA
Yes.
certificate,
Uh-huh.
so
They're-
we're a little
they
bit of
can
a
do all
different
kinds of
animal.
cool
That's
stuff.
Yeah.
much easier. Hospital-based is much easier.
So, I mean, this is an interesting question, isn't it? So, this sounds like a Dr. Wampler question.
It really shouldn't be the fact that we have to question a paramedic's ability to draw blood when we look at all the other things.
Yeah, I mean, so, but you don't need to feel bad. I mean, this is,
Oh,
I mean.
I get it. It's just
One
a-
of the hospitals that I work in won't let the physicians do the guaiac test to see if there's a blood. It has
Not
to be sent
qualified.
to the lab. Yeah, not
That's another
qualified,
thing.
because they've not had their eyes test to assess the degree of colorblind they might have to see if they can accurately interpret this test. So
Take an online test.
the insanity is,
You can't smear poop without taking a test.
yeah. Well, you can smear it, you just can't put the developer on
You
it.
can't put the drops on it and see if it's purple or not.
Please put that in the minutes, Lisa, okay? You can't smear food without taking a test on it. All right, so there's any other things we need to think about doing other than what we mentioned previously? I don't hear anything. Any other comments? Public comments? I think we're done. This is a wonderful meeting. Welcome new members, appreciate it, and look forward to a good year. 13 minutes early.